German Shepherd was found, cemented to the floor. Baby's touch saved its life. The sound was barely there, just a weak, muffled whimper beneath the crunch of gravel and broken tiles. The demolition crew paused, puzzled. One of the workers, a man named Luis, cocked his head. "Did you hear that?" he asked. Another man shrugged. "It's probably pipes, or rats," but Luis wasn't sure. The sound had a sadness to it, a cry that didn't belong to anything small or quick. He walked toward the back corner of the old, half-demolished warehouse and crouched low, pressing his ear to the concrete. There it was again, a faint, shaking cry. Luis stood up fast. "Hey, bring a crowbar, now!" Meanwhile, just a few blocks away, little Eli, just shy of 3 years old, sat quietly in his stroller. He hadn't said a word since they'd passed the construction site. His mom, Sarah, noticed the change. "You okay, buddy?" He blinked up at her. "Doggy," he said softly. Sarah smiled. "No, sweetie. That place is empty. No dogs there." Eli shook his head. "Doggy's crying." She crouched next to him. "What dog?" He pointed at the building they'd passed 10 minutes ago. "There." Sarah followed his finger, confused. "There's no one in there, honey." Eli didn't argue, but he also didn't let it go. Back, at the site, Luis and his crew were down on their knees now, tapping the concrete, searching for the weakest spot. One of them peeled up a layer of tile, revealing a cracked section filled with what looked like dried cement. But there was something under it. A shape. Soft. "Oh my God," Luis whispered. They started chipping away, slow and careful. With every tap of the hammer, the cries grew a little louder. Ragged, weak, barely surviving. "Is it a dog?" one of them asked. Luis didn't answer. He was already digging faster, his heart pounding. An hour passed, then another. The shape under the cement began to take form, first a paw, then an ear, both pressed deep into the cold, dry mix. The cement had hardened around the animal like a coffin, but somehow it was alive. "We need to call someone," Luis said. "Right now." Just then, a soft voice cut through the dust-filled air. "Doggy!" Everyone turned. Standing near the fence, gripping the bars with tiny fingers, was Eli. Sarah ran behind him, apologizing. "I'm so sorry. He wouldn't stop talking about this place. I didn't think..." But she froze when she saw what they were doing. "Is that a dog?" Luis nodded. "Barely breathing. We're trying to free him." Eli didn't say anything. He just walked closer, past the men, and sat down beside the injured shepherd. He looked into the animal's half-closed eyes. "Hi, doggy," he whispered. "I came." One of the workers tried to pull Eli back. "Hey, buddy, careful, he's hurt." But the shepherd didn't flinch. His chest rose just a little more. Eli reached out, placing his small hand gently on the dog's nose. The shepherd's ear twitched. Luis looked at Sarah. I think he knows the kids here." Sarah was frozen. Her hand covered her mouth. "They always say animals know kindness," someone said. The sun began to drop, and the shadows stretched longer over the ruins. The crew worked into the evening, chipping and digging with trembling hands. Luis poured warm water over the hardened cement to loosen it. Every minute counted. Eli never left the dog's side. "Mommy," he said once. "He's scared." Sarah crouched beside him. "I know, baby, but they're helping him." "No," Eli whispered. He thought no one was coming. The shepherd let out a breath that sounded like a sigh. He blinked again. Weakly, slowly. "He's still alive," Luis said with relief. By sunset, the workers had freed most of his body. His legs were raw, stuck in painful positions for too long. His fur was matted and dry, stained grey from dust and cement. But his eyes were locked on Eli. "Can he walk?" Sarah asked. Luis shook his head. "We don't even know how long he's been in there." One of the men brought a blanket. "Let's move him gently." They wrapped the shepherd carefully, trying not to cause more pain. Luis lifted him in two. His arms. "Where do we take him?" he asked. Sarah stepped forward. "There's a shelter not far. They might—" "No, they have to help." Eli walked beside them as they carried the broken dog to the truck. He looked up once and asked, "Will he go to sleep?" Luis glanced down. "He might, but now he knows someone cares." Eli nodded. "I'll come tomorrow." And as they drove toward the shelter, with sirens fading in the distance and streetlights flickering on one by one, a soft breeze blew through the cracked warehouse window. Where there had been silence for days, now there had been hope. The next morning, Eli refused to eat. He pushed his cereal bowl away and stared out the window, lips pressed tight. Sarah sighed. "Eli, baby, you love breakfast." He didn't look at her. "Doggie's still crying." Sarah froze. It had been almost a full day since they'd stumbled onto the injured German shepherd. She had tried to explain to Eli that the workers had taken care of it, that someone would help. But he kept shaking his head, quiet and stubborn. "He's waiting for me," Eli said. Sarah rubbed her forehead. "Sweetheart, it's dangerous there. The workers said the dog might be going to a shelter. You did all you could." But Eli didn't budge. "Please, Mommy," he whispered. "Please." 10 minutes later, Sarah gave in. When they reached the broken fence surrounding the site, she could already hear voices. The workers were back, speaking in low tones. Luis stood near the edge of the cement slab, hands on his hips, looking troubled. Eli slipped from his mum's grip and ran. "Eli, wait!" she called out. But he didn't stop. His small feet pounded across the gravel until he reached the exact spot where the shepherd had been uncovered. He dropped to his knees and placed one hand on the floor. Then he whispered, "He's still here." Luis turned, startled. "Hey there, kid." "He's scared," Eli said, not lifting his hand. Luis crouched beside him. "We moved him last night. Took him to the shelter. He's being treated." Eli shook his head. Not his body, his heart. Luis looked confused, but something about the boy's stillness. It gave him chills. "Okay," Luis said carefully. "Let's check." The workers led Sarah and Eli across the rubble toward a small trailer near the edge of the property. Inside, on a thin blanket, lay the shepherd. His eyes were closed. A vet knelt beside him, slowly wiping dried blood from one of his legs. "He hasn't moved since we brought him in," the vet said. Eli stepped forward and sat quietly beside the dog. Then, gently, he reached out and touched the shepherd's paw. Nothing happened at first, just silence. The vet shook her head. "We're not sure he's going to—" The shepherd's paw twitched. Everyone froze. "Wait," the vet whispered. The dog's eyes fluttered open. His gaze moved slowly until it rested on Eli. Sarah covered her mouth with her hand. "Oh, my God!" Eli smiled. "Hi, doggy." The shepherd gave a faint, hoarse whine. Luis leaned in. "He knows you." Eli didn't look away. "I heard him, before anyone else did." Luis stared at the boy. "How? You weren't even near the building." Eli shrugged. "He called me." No one said a word, not even Sarah. For a moment it felt like time stopped. Just a quiet, warm moment between a boy and a dog, both too young to understand fear, but somehow deeply connected. The vet whispered, "I don't understand this. He didn't react to pain meds, not to our touch." But the second Eli walked in, the shepherd blinked slowly, eyes still locked on Eli. Sarah knelt beside her son. "Baby, do you want to go home now?" Eli shook his head. "He's alone." Luis spoke gently. "We'll watch him, I promise." But Eli was already lying, down beside the dog, curling into his side like he would a stuffed animal. The shepherd made another soft sound, not a whimper this time. It was closer to a sigh. "Can I stay?" Eli asked. The vet hesitated, then nodded. just for a bit. And for the next hour, the construction workers, Sarah, and the vet watched a strange kind of healing take place. Eli hummed softly, rubbing slow circles on the shepherd's side. The dog didn't sleep, but he didn't shake either. He didn't flinch. His breathing slowed, and his eyes stayed open, like he was afraid to blink and lose the boy. Louise leaned into the vet. "We need to find who did this." She nodded. "We'll scan him for a chip. Maybe there's something." Sarah sat on a plastic crate nearby, eyes misty. "This is something I'll never forget. Neither would anyone else. Eli never asked for food, never asked to leave. He just stayed. And for the first time since they found him buried in concrete, the German shepherd stopped crying. The cold wind cut through the broken windows of the old warehouse as the workers stood over the cracked cement floor, unsure where to strike first. Louise knelt and tapped gently with the back of a hammer. The sound echoed hollow in one spot. "Here," he said. The others gathered around, their faces tight with worry. Eli sat cross-legged on the dusty floor a few feet away, eyes locked on the patch of cement. He hadn't moved for over an hour. Sarah offered him snacks. He didn't touch them. Louise gave a nod. The first blow landed soft, then another, and another. The cement chipped slowly, peeling off in uneven flakes. A shovel scraped against something that wasn't rock. Louise paused. "Careful. Something's under this." The crew switched to smaller tools, a chisel, a spade. Their hands trembled. Eli edged closer. "Be gentle," he said. One of the men smiled faintly. "We are, little man." Minutes turned into hours. Dust filled the air. Sweat rolled down necks despite the chill. And then Louis saw it. Dark fur, matted, pressed flat against the ground. "Stop," he said sharply. "I see something." Everyone froze. He brushed it gently with gloved fingers. It didn't move. "Is that hair?" another whispered. Louis nodded. "It's a dog." A ripple of silence moved through the room. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh, God!" They kept. Ghost in a quiet room, lights low, a soft blanket draped over him. Eli brought his favorite toy, a tiny stuffed lamb, and tucked it under Ghost's chin. "Sleep good, okay?" he said. No bad dreams, but Ghost flinched in his sleep. Pause, twitched, whimpers escaped his mouth. Eli sat beside him, hand resting gently on his side. "Even heroes have bad days," Sarah whispered, watching her son. Dr. Jensen agreed. "But they don't give up. That's what makes them heroes." The next morning, Ghost woke up slower. His eyes searched the room like he didn't trust it yet. But when Eli walked in, he lifted his head and licked the boy's hand. Not everything was fixed, but Ghost was still here, still fighting, and that mattered more than anything. The day after, Ghost's breakdown, Sarah made a decision. "No more waiting," she told Dr. Jensen. "He doesn't need discipline. He needs help." That afternoon, she called a trauma therapist, one who specialized in abused rescue animals. Her name was Clara, and when she stepped into the shelter, Ghost growled low from his crate. Clara didn't flinch. She simply knelt, down, staying quiet. "He's scared," Eli whispered, standing close to Ghost. "But I'll stay too." Clara smiled gently. "I wouldn't have it any other way." Their session started the next day. No collars, no commands, just quiet moments and soft presence. At first, Ghost didn't move. He barely blinked. Clara sat several feet away, letting him see her, smell her, get used to her. Eli always sat beside Ghost, humming softly or reading from his favorite picture book. "I'm not scared of you," Eli would say. "You don't have to be scared of her." After a few sessions, Clara gently tossed a treat across the floor. Ghost watched it, unmoving. "It's okay," Eli said. "You can try." A minute later, Ghost shifted. one paw forward, then another. He nudged the treat, then looked back at Eli. "Good boy," Clara whispered. It wasn't much, but it was something. The next day, they tried something harder. Clara said one word. "Sit." Ghost tensed. Eli noticed. "It's not a command. It's just a game." Then he sat down himself. "See? Sit." Ghost blinked slowly. His body shook a little, but he lowered himself. It wasn't a perfect sit. It wasn't even steady. But it was enough to make Sarah cry in the corner of the room. "He's trying," she whispered. Clara nodded. "That's all we ask." Day by day, the routine grew. Eli read. Clara guided. Ghost listened. He began walking. More, slowly but confidently. He stopped flinching when the door creaked. He began eating with his bowl out in the open, not tucked into a corner like he used to. "He's learning to feel safe," Clara said. "It's not about training. It's about trust." One morning, Ghost entered the therapy room and wagged. His tail, just once, just a soft, slow sweep behind him. Everyone froze. "Did he just—" Greg asked from the hallway. Eli grinned. "He's happy." Sarah covered her mouth. "He's coming back." Clara beamed. "Yes, he is. By the end of the week." Ghost sat on command without shaking. He accepted treats from Clara's hand. He let new staff pet him gently, but his eyes still always followed Eli. He'd been Ghost's anchor, and now he was the reason Ghost could stand tall again. That evening, Sarah pulled Clara aside. "Why is he still so afraid of men?" Clara spoke, gently. "It's a pattern. Abusers leave shadows. It takes time to overwrite that fear. But Eli's a boy." Clara smiled. "Yes, and Ghost learned that not all boys hurt. Eli was his proof that not every hand strikes." Inside the room, Eli laid his head on Ghost's chest. "See," he whispered. "Told you you'd get better." Ghost wrapped his paw gently around Eli's foot, eyes half closed in calm. Outside, Clara watched the scene through the window and whispered, "That's what healing looks like. Not loud, not perfect, but full of hope." The arrest came early in the morning. Flashing lights lit up a trailer park on the edge of town. The man in the blue truck didn't resist. He barely spoke. The spiral tattoo on his wrist was undeniable. The photos, the video, the witness statements. Everything had stacked up. Animal cruelty, illegal dogfighting, attempted destruction of evidence. He was no longer just a suspect. He was the man who tried to bury Ghost alive. When Sarah got the call from the detective, she didn't speak at first. She just sat on the edge of her bed, hand over her heart. "They got him," the detective said. "He's not going to hurt." Another dog again. The trial was scheduled for the following month. Ghost had grown stronger every day since the therapy began. He could now walk short distances without support. His tail wagged freely. His bark, once broken and raspy, had returned with confidence. So when the invitation came to attend the trial, Sarah didn't hesitate. "Are you sure?" Dr. Jensen asked. "It might be too much stimulation." Sarah looked down at Ghost, who sat quietly beside Eli. "He's ready." Eli looked up, voice steady. "He needs to see it. He needs to know the bad man doesn't win." The courthouse was packed. Animal rights groups, reporters, curious neighbors. The trial had drawn attention not just because of the cruelty, but because of Ghost. Everyone had seen the viral photo. The broken shepherd rescued by a toddler. The miracle dog who lived. They didn't see a victim. They saw a survivor. As Sarah walked Ghost through the front doors, a quiet hush fell across the crowd. He wore a simple harness, a vest with the words "Survivor" stitched across the side. At his side, Eli held the leash. One reporter whispered, "That's him. That's Ghost." The judge allowed them to sit in the front row, Sarah, Eli, and Ghost, together. The man in the blue truck sat across the room in a grey jumpsuit, wrists chained. He didn't look up. But Ghost did. The moment he entered, Ghost froze. His body stiffened. His eyes locked on the man. Eli gently tugged the leash. "It's okay," he whispered. "He's caged now, just like you were." Ghost let out one sharp breath, then sat beside Eli. His eyes never left the man. The prosecutor showed the photos, the video, the records from the vet. Clara submitted her therapy notes. Dr. Jensen testified about the injuries, how they weren't just painful, but deliberate. Sarah was asked to speak. She stood with her voice firm. "He wasn't just thrown away," she said. "He was buried. This man tried to erase him." The defense didn't argue much. They knew it was over. When the judge returned with the sentence, 15 years without parole, the room didn't cheer. It just breathed. And then the cameras turned toward the front row. Ghost placed his paw on Eli's lap. Eli, without being told, took it in both hands. Click, click, click. One photo would go viral before the day was done, but in that moment, it was just them. "Is it over?" Eli asked. Sarah nodded, tears in her eyes. "Yes, baby. He can't hurt anyone else now." The judge, stepping down from the bench, walked over to them. She crouched in front of Ghost. "You're not a victim," she said softly. "You're a hero." Ghost didn't bark. He didn't growl. He simply leaned forward and rested his head gently against her hand. The courtroom melted in silence. Sarah stroked his fur. "You did it," she whispered. Eli smiled. "Told you you'd beat the bad guy." As they left the courthouse, people clapped softly. Not because the man went to prison, but because the dog who wasn't supposed to survive had walked back into the light and brought others with him. The shelter had never seen a day like this. Colourful balloons lined the hallway. A long banner stretched across the front doors. "Welcome home, Ghost." Staff bustled about setting up folding chairs, a small podium, and a table full of treats, both for humans and dogs. But no one could stop talking about the moment that was about to happen. After weeks of recovery, therapy, and national attention, it was finally official. Ghost was being adopted, and not by just anyone, by Eli and Sarah. The press had shown up early. Reporters lined the walkway, microphones ready, lenses pointed toward the shelter entrance. Some were from local news outlets. Others came from far away. Everyone wanted to see the moment when the dog who had once been buried would find his forever home. Inside, Eli brushed Ghost's fur with gentle strokes, his tongue poking from the corner of his mouth as he concentrated. "You have to look nice," he whispered. "It's your big day." Ghost sat patiently, tail swaying slowly, his eyes soft and calm. Sarah knelt beside them. "You ready, big guy?" Ghost licked Eli's hand in response. "He's ready," Eli said with a grin. Dr. Jensen peeked in from the doorway. "They're all set outside." Sarah stood and straightened her shirt. "Let's give them a moment they'll never forget." Eli grabbed the special leash, navy blue with silver letters that read, "Family Forever." When they stepped outside, the crowd fell silent. Then the clapping started. Slow at first, then louder. Cheers followed. Some people had tears in their eyes before they even reached the podium. Greg stepped up to the mic. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for being here today. What started as a rescue turned into something much bigger, a story of survival, of hope, and of love." He looked over at Ghost. A dog once buried in cement is now standing strong because someone refused to stop listening. He gestured for Sarah and Eli to join him. Sarah took the mic. Her voice wavered, but she didn't stop. "When we found Ghost, he wasn't just hurt. He was invisible, forgotten, left behind. But Eli saw him when no one else did. And now, we're bringing him home." Eli stepped up beside her, barely tall enough to reach the mic. He tugged it down gently. Looking at Ghost, he said, "You're home now." The crowd went quiet. Ghost wagged his tail, walked up to Eli, and licked his face. That was it. People cried. Even the toughest reporter in the back wiped his eyes. Clara, the trauma therapist, laughed through tears. That's the best therapy. Progress report I've ever seen. The adoption papers were signed on the spot, framed and handed to Eli. He held them with both hands like they were treasure. As they walked through the crowd, Ghost beside them, cameras flashed. But Eli didn't look at anyone else. His eyes were only for the big, scarred dog next to him. Sarah leaned down. "How do you feel?" Eli grinned. "Like we won." That night, they brought Ghost home for the first time. No concrete, no cages. Just blankets, love, and the soft hum of a family that never gave up. The sun peeked out from behind grey clouds that morning, warm but gentle. The air felt light, almost like it knew what kind of day it was. Inside their small living room, Sarah helped Eli put on his jacket while Ghost waited by the door, tail thumping softly against the wall. "You ready?" Sarah asked, holding up the leash. Eli didn't answer. He just smiled wide and nodded. Ghost stood slowly, his back legs still, moved with a slight wobble, but he no longer needed help to stand. He walked to the door, steady, proud, his eyes focused on the boy who had never left his side. Eli took the leash in both hands. "Walk with me, okay?" Ghost let out a quiet woof, just enough to say yes. Sarah opened the door, and the two of them stepped outside. Neighbors peeked from windows. A few even stood on their porches, waving quietly. Word had spread quickly. Ghost, the miracle dog, was going on his first real walk. Eli walked slow at first. Ghost matched his pace perfectly. Step by step, they moved down the street. The leash stayed loose. There was no tugging, no fear, no hesitation. Ghost sniffed at flowers growing along a fence. He paused at the corner mailbox. He barked once at a squirrel, and then wagged his tail like it surprised even him. Sarah followed behind with her phone, capturing it all. "You're doing it, baby," she whispered to herself. "You're really doing it." They turned toward the park. Children played by the swings, and parents stopped to watch as Eli and Ghost passed by. One little girl pointed and whispered to her mum, "That's the dog from the video." Ghost didn't flinch at the noise. He didn't shy away. He just walked proudly, head held high, soaking in the world he had almost never seen again. Eli pointed toward a bench and said, "Let's rest." They sat together. Eli's feet dangled above the ground. Ghost lay beside him, tongue out, eyes half closed. "He likes the sun," Eli said to Sarah. She nodded. "He's never had a walk like this before." Ghost looked up at Eli. He nudged the boy's knee gently with his nose. "Okay," Eli whispered. "Let's keep going." They rose and headed down the path again, this time toward the edge of town. And there, standing tall with broken windows and a crumbling frame, was the old building, the place where Ghost had once been left for dead. Eli slowed. Ghost stopped. For a moment, there was silence. Then, something amazing happened. Ghost took a step forward, and another. He walked up to the edge of the cracked pavement and sniffed the ground. He stood there for a long time, just breathing. Then he looked back at Eli, eyes calm. He didn't shake. He didn't cower. He just stood. Sarah held her breath. Ghost let out a quiet breath through his nose, turned around, and walked away. Eli followed, whispering, "Good boy." As they returned to the neighborhood, the sky opened just enough to let golden light stream through the clouds. Ghost walked a little faster now. Eli tightened his grip on the leash, but smiled. And as they reached their front door, Sarah snapped a final photo. Eli with wind-blown hair, Ghost at his side, both walking tall like they had just conquered the world. Because in their own quiet way, they had. By the end of the week, Ghost was everywhere. Local news ran the headline, "First, Dog cemented alive now heals, thanks to Toddler's touch. But it didn't stay local for long. National outlets picked up the story. Then, international ones. Clips of Ghost limping beside Eli played on morning shows. Talk shows requested. Interviews. Online articles described him as a miracle, a symbol of survival, and the dog who refused to die. But Eli didn't care about any of that. When a reporter asked him, "How does it feel to be famous?" he simply said, "He's just my friend, that's all." The shelter phone rang non-stop. One call was from a rescue center in Oregon. They wanted to start a healing program for abused animals and name it the Ghost Project. Another came from a woman in Canada who had been abused by her partner. She saw Ghost's story and found the courage to leave. "I saw myself in him," she wrote in her letter. "Trapped, forgotten, but still breathing. And then I saw him walk again. That gave me strength." Hundreds of letters arrived over the next few days. Some were from children, others from elderly strangers. Many were just one line. "Thank you, Ghost." Clara, the trauma therapist, showed up to the shelter one morning holding a notebook full of drawings made by kids in her clinic. Each one was of Ghost. One showed him with wings, another with a superhero cape. One drawing simply had a heart and the words, "You give hope." "We've never had a therapy animal reach kids like this," Clara told Sarah. "He doesn't just make them smile, he makes them feel brave." Sarah wiped tears from her eyes. "He's making us all feel that way." The mayor sent an official letter, declaring the date of Ghost's adoption as Ghost Day in the town's calendar. A bronze plaque was commissioned to be placed in front of the shelter. In honor of Ghost, the one who rose from silence, and the boy who listened. Greg was invited to speak on a radio program. When asked what made Ghost so special, he paused before saying, "We didn't save him. Eli did." One afternoon, Sarah received a call from a school in the city. A teacher wanted to bring her students to meet Ghost. "He's teaching more than we ever could about kindness," the teacher said. "Can they come see him?" Sarah looked over at Eli, who was laying on the floor beside Ghost, reading a story aloud about a brave knight and a dragon. "Sure," she said, "but don't expect a big speech. He'll probably just tell them Ghost is his best buddy." And he did. When the kids arrived, Ghost stayed calm as dozens of tiny hands gently patted his fur. One child asked, "Is he magic?" Eli replied, "No, he's just really strong." The boy leaned down and whispered, "So are you." That night, as Sarah tucked Eli into bed, he looked up sleepily and said, "Why do people keep saying miracle?" She brushed his hair back. "Because most dogs wouldn't have made it. Most kids wouldn't have known he was there. And almost nobody would have believed you." Eli blinked slowly. "But I just heard him." Sarah smiled. "That's the miracle." Downstairs, Ghost slept peacefully on his new dog bed, one with his name embroidered across it in bold letters. His legs no longer twitched in fear. His breaths came soft and steady. The world called him a symbol, an inspiration, a survivor. But to Eli, he was just Ghost. Just a friend who needed someone to listen. The evening sky was painted in soft golds and purples as the sun sank behind the trees. Inside their small living room, the lights were off. No screens, no distractions, just quiet. Eli lay on the rug, his head resting on Ghost's side. The big shepherd breathed calmly beneath him, chest, rising and falling like waves on a sleepy sea. It had become their tradition. After dinner, after the world settled down, Eli and Ghost would curl up together on the floor, wrapped in silence. Sarah sat on the couch nearby, watching them through glassy eyes. Sometimes she still couldn't believe it. Months ago, Ghost had been a ghost, forgotten under a cracked cement floor. And Eli. He had been a little boy who didn't speak much, who felt things so deeply, no one quite understood him. Now, both had bloomed in ways no one expected. Outside, wind rustled the leaves, gently. Eli spoke first, his voice barely above a whisper. You saved me too. Ghost lifted his head slightly, eyes finding the boy's. Then, slowly, he rested it in Eli's lap. Eli stroked behind his ears. Before you, I didn't talk much. I didn't have a friend. Sarah's heart clenched. She remembered those quiet days, how Eli would stare out the window or talk to the air. No one knew what he needed. They didn't realize he was just waiting to meet someone who would understand without needing words. You were hurt, Eli continued, but you still loved me. Ghost closed his eyes, his tail giving a soft thump. Even when people forgot about you, Eli whispered, you were still kind. Sarah wiped away a tear before it could fall. This wasn't just the end of a recovery. It was the beginning of something permanent. They were a family now, complete in their own strange, beautiful way. Earlier that day, Sarah had opened a letter from the shelter. It was from one of the board members. It read, in all my years, I've never seen a case turn out like this. Ghost's recovery reminds us why we do this work. Eli's bond with him has inspired not just donations, but change. You and your son gave him more than a home. You gave him dignity. And in return, he gave your son a voice. She folded the letter and tucked it into the photo album where they'd kept every drawing, every news clipping, every hospital band. From Ghost's early days, the world would never forget Ghost's name. But that night, in their quiet home, the headlines didn't matter. Only the soft rhythm of breath, the weight of a dog's head in a child's lap, the warmth of a hand resting gently on fur. Sarah came down from the couch and sat beside them. She kissed Eli's forehead. Thank you for finding him. Eli looked up. I think he found me too. And maybe he had. Because sometimes, the ones we rescue are the ones who save us right back. Ghost wasn't supposed to survive, but love changed the story. One tiny hand, one broken dog, one touch that changed two lives forever.